Welcome back to another episode of Chatting Cinema. I'm Gianni.
I'm Flynn.
I'm Luke.
And I'm Ian.
Who is
And-
that?
The new guy on the block. That's me.
Yeah. So I dug Ian up out of a garbage can on the side of the road and was like, "Get on this pod." And he was like, "Yeah, sure."
Out of the internet ditch, the dregs of the internet. I was
Yeah.
One of the internet black holes.
Yeah. Well, recently was Star Wars fans' favorite holiday, May the 4th. So this is kind of like a sequel episode to our May the 4th episode because the Clone Wars finale came out and we did not talk about it yet. So that's why Ian's on, because Ian also does a Star Wars YouTube channel. So we figured we'd bring in a ringer to help talk about the Clone Wars.
It's funny. I don't have a podcast. Like, my YouTube channel is my creative outlet, but whenever I'm invited on podcasts, which I'm very grateful to be on this one, it's always for two things. It's either baseball or Star Wars. Like, I'm never on. I never talk about anything else. So this is like right up my alley.
Yeah, well, judging on everything behind you, baseball and Star Wars adds up.
It's the only two things I know.
Do you want to plug the channel real quick before we get started?
Yeah. All right. So you can follow me on two different platforms. Obviously, the main one is YouTube at Talking with My Hans, capital letter of each word. I have a few videos up there now. I'm like 15 or 16 videos. Please subscribe. We try to stay positive on the channel. I get a little narcissistic sometimes, but nobody hates Star Wars like Star Wars fans, as they say. And then you can also follow me on Twitter at talkwithmyhans_, and I do a lot more narcissism on there if you're into that sort of thing.
Cool. So I know this week we were going to talk a little bit about the Clone Wars, but I wanted to ask Ian first. What's your favorite Star Wars movie?
Favorite Star Wars movie right now is Empire Strikes Back. That's not really a question for me. It's
Did he freeze for you guys too?
Yeah.
Yep.
Awesome.
So I'll speak for him. He loves Empire.
Empire's pretty good.
Yeah, no, Empire is dope. This is funny. He's frozen in funny pose.
Oh, he's back. We got him.
Yo, hey, Talking with my Hans, you froze, so we got none of that.
Classic. That's because Talking with My Hans internet is like F tier internet. So anyway, Empire Strikes Back is my favorite movie, but A New Hope is definitely creeping up there. I'm not a prequel stan. I'm not like any of that. Just give me the originals. I'm going to watch them. And then prequels, Revenge of the Sith is up there. But, Empire Strikes Back. We'll stick with that one for now.
Cool.
Classic.
Okay.
He's
so I
got
guess
some Star Wars hot takes that will be unearthed. It's fun.
Yeah, if you
Love to hear
scratch
'em.
the surface a little bit, maybe I'll leak.
So, all right. So it doesn't sound like you're a huge prequels fan, but are you big on the Clone Wars?
I'm huge on the Clone Wars. I watched the Clone Wars when it came out on TV. I watched weekly for a long time. And then the show kind of loses its way after a while. And as you get older, you start to realize that Star Wars is not really the coolest thing to do. And like when we were growing up, me and Luke, we get to like, 8th, 9th grade. And then, Star Wars kind of just becomes this like, okay, like you can like it, but just don't push it in our face, So, you watch the Clone Wars in secret, but, ever since I came back to college, I've binged the series 2 or 3 times. I'm a huge Clone Wars fan. It's not that I hate the prequels. I'm just not like, some people are like, oh, they're secret genius. I'm not gonna kid myself. The Phantom Menace and especially Attack of the Clones, there's no secret genius there. It's just what it is. But to answer your question,
it's funny what you said. It's funny what you said about like 8th or 9th grade is when it's like, all right, don't be all about Star Wars. You can like it. I literally remember the day Ian and I were in high school. We were in 11th grade. And the first trailer for The Force Awakens dropped. He texted me. I ran to our TV studio in the high school. And there was like a group of 10 of us that watched it. And we all were just like, okay, Star Wars is cool again. Let's start screaming about it. From that point on, it was just like, no looking back. Star Wars is it.
It was like one of those moments that like your grandparents talk about where they're like, oh, we all huddled around the radio for like an hour. Like it was like 12 of us that huddled around this 2012 MacBook watching Star Wars trailers like over and over.
All freaking out when Han said Chewie were home. Forget about it.
Such a good trailer.
Yeah. So I guess moving back into season 7 of the Clone Wars, which just wrapped up. What did you guys think? I loved it personally.
Yeah, I think it's a great season. I think that the first couple arcs, the one with the Bad Batch and then the one on Coruscant, I think people weren't as in love with. But I also think it was they were very much in the vein of what Clone Wars has been, which is I think that there's a lot of like not filler arcs, but arcs that are like of less importance that are just sort of side adventures that give way to the main ones, which is what the final arc, which is the last 4 episodes of this season, were all about, which was one of the biggest arcs that Clone Wars has ever done, and I think one of the best. I think it could be my favorite. It's that or the Mortis trilogy for me, because I think that's some of the best Star Wars ever, the Mortis episodes. But this was super good and a fantastic way to wrap up the show. I like that this was saved for last because it felt like it was kind of ramping up and you had more anticipation building up to that final arc there.
I was a big fan of this season. Like Flynn said, it was very in tune with what the Clone Wars has been the last 6 seasons, where not every single episode is driving forward the story a crazy amount. It's just filling out this massive war that happened that we had no idea what it was. Back in 2005, we were seeing episode 3 in theaters, and we were just like, wait, but the war is over. Like the first hour, the war is over. So like this show delivers exactly what it was intended to do, which was the war. And the Bad Batch episodes I thought were wonderful because just give me as much clone content as possible. Like each time there's a new named one. Like I don't think there was a named clone that I really disliked. Like they were all just fun, and especially the Bad Batch, especially them.
Yeah.
And like seeing Rex and then Fives back, like an Echo being back, like so many cool moments in the Bad Batch arc. And then I think the best part about the Coruscant / Spice Running arc that a lot of people were hating on was a lot of people weren't like gung-ho for the Jedi during the war, and it showed that. Like it wasn't as common of a thing, but like still not everybody was peachy with the Jedi. Like they all weren't happy about it. And then that final 4 episode stretch, like chef's kiss, peak Star Wars. I'm saying it was so good. I loved it.
Yeah.
I was a big fan of this season. Go ahead, Gianni. Go ahead.
No, okay, thanks. No, I think a lot of people talk about the evolution of the series as a whole. And for me, what stood out the most in season 7 was the animation improvements.
Yeah.
Like
Oh my
season 6
God.
looked great, but then moving into season 7, it looks like borderline cinematic,
Yeah, it's gorgeous.
Yeah. And a lot
like
of
into
it.
the Spider-Verse level animation.
Yeah, definitely.
I just
some
went
of the-
back and watched season 1 not too long ago, and it was, oh my God, it's like watching a PS1 game. Like
It's night and day.
It's the music is like way off track from what Star Wars is. The animation is blocky, and it looks like it's like filmed in 12 frames per second. I was like, oh my God, like how did this make it to air? Like how is this the first thing they were allowed to put on air?
Yeah.
But after this last season, I'm so glad that you guys said that this was very in the vein of Clone Wars, because as soon as the Bad Batch arc started up, I'm like, dang, like this is Clone Wars. Like action, it's got the dialogue. I mean, a lot of that comes from having the same crew, just copy and paste. But like, dang, like they did not miss a beat. And then I was very, what's the word? I was disgruntled with the fans that were disappointed in the Bad Batch arc and then in the Coruscant arc, because you had all this anticipation building up, and I think a lot of people got it in their heads that it was like, oh, they are going to rewrite all these episodes, they're going to do all these episodes over, and it's like, you're not. Like these episodes were already in place. Like these were storyboarded. These have already been written. So when you understand the Clone Wars, you understand that there was supposed to be a whole nother season after this. It's like, yeah, these episodes are not going to be the best thing ever. But then you did get the best thing ever because they rewrote it from the ground up. They made it fit into the rest of the saga, and the Siege of Mandalore just completely blows the doors off of what Star Wars animation has been for the last, I don't know, decade and 2 years.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that this last 4 episode arc, I don't know if this is a hot take because everybody's been showering the series finale with praise, which is well deserved. The final episode of this arc did feel to me like maybe they had 3 episodes plus worth of content for this arc and kind of stretched it, because the last scene of the final episode of this arc is phenomenal. It's so good. But leading up to that, there was well choreographed action, but it just really felt like a continuation of what we had gotten in episode 3 of this arc. So it did feel to me like being stretched a little bit thinner than maybe they wanted. But overall, just I think that a lot of people are going to watch this as one complete package. Like, we had to wait weekly for these episodes, so that's how we consumed them. But I think that going forward, nobody's going to watch it an episode at a time. Anybody that sits down that's going to watch this arc with Ahsoka and Maul and Order 66 and the Siege of Mandalore are going to watch it all at once. So I think it'll play better as that. But, watching it as its own episode, it did feel like maybe it could have been combined into the last episode. But I watched it after watching 26 hours straight of Star Wars.
Yeah, that's not healthy. Not even I'm doing that.
Yeah, no, throw some Fs in the comment section for Flynn's 26-hour marathon that he successfully completed. If you follow him on Twitter, you could have followed along on the journey.
It was a good time. It'll never happen again.
No.
But it was definitely a unique experience that I very much enjoyed. And I capped it off with this finale of Clone Wars, which is a show that means something to me and a show that I really like. So it was cool to finish that marathon and see all of the Star Wars that I've seen countless times and end it with something fresh that I had never seen before, with new content. So that was cool.
Yeah.
Yeah,
we mentioned
I definitely.
Mhm.
Or you go, Gianni. Send
Okay.
it.
Yeah, no, we mentioned this on the May 4th episode that the Clone Wars has really informed our opinions on the prequels, but specifically with this last arc, Revenge of the Sith. Everything changes now, at least for me. When I go back and watch that movie, I'm thinking about this story going on at the same time. And it's just great how they really wove it together in the end,
Yeah, definitely. I think it's interesting, especially when we look at Anakin's relationship with Ahsoka, because you take into account what's going on with Padme and Anakin's relationship throughout the entirety of Revenge of the Sith, and then you throw in there like, oh, by the way, minutes before Order 66 and Anakin's fall and transformation into Darth Vader, he also reconnected with Ahsoka. So just a highly emotional time for somebody whose occupation does not allow them to have emotions.
And since Disney's taken over Lucasfilm, I've noticed that the new canon has done that really well, not just in Clone Wars, but like in a lot of things, it's very well interwoven with the movies. Everything is very tightly connected. 10 years ago, 20 years ago, there wasn't the story group. So you had kind of this free-for-all of content, which some was great, some was not so great. But now that you have this central piece, you can really see where Disney is like, yes, the movies are the focal point, and we're going to build content around that. And the Siege of Mandalore was like the perfect example of that. And like you said, Gianni, you're going to go back to see Revenge of the Sith, and it's never going to be the same. Like, it just won't be for the rest of our lives. And that is like incredible that a movie that old can just be completely upended, and your whole thought process can be different now that you've seen something else.
Yeah, well, Ian and I were talking about this the other day on the phone when I asked him to be on the pod. We were talking about how the Clone Wars completely changes the prequels altogether, where as you watch episode 1, how can you not think about all the great Darth Maul stories we get after that, and knowing like where his character is then to where it is now, like, or episode 2, like it's not like in episode 2 you see the clones at the end, and then you see them in 3 betraying the Jedi. Now you know them, now you love them, like it's forever changed. And these movies were like so hated when they came out, except for by our generation because we were kids. And then now it's like there's a cult following for them, but also the Clone Wars just makes them better. Like, it fills out the stories, you learn more about the characters. Like, watching the Clone Wars, like, all right, guys, this is 2005, it's not a spoiler. Like, watching Ki-Adi-Mundi get shot during Order 66 hurts so much more now. Or watching Aayla Secura get shot, or Plo Koon. All of those characters mean so much more now because of this at first terrible PS1 animation TV show that developed in some of the best TV animation we've seen. We talked about this, how Ray Park Jr. did the motion capture for Maul for the lightsaber duel between him and Ahsoka, which is now very commonly on Star Wars Twitter regarded as one of the best lightsaber duels in the franchise. And all the other ones are from movies. So, like, for the fact that an animation TV show is just even on that list for people is crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, and something else that we talked about on our May 4th pod was the moral gray in that lightsaber battle, where you're talking about Maul is kind of on one side of the extreme and Ahsoka's on the other, but they're not to the extreme of where the Sith and the Jedi are, and they're trying to find somewhere in the center. I really liked how they handled Ahsoka in this arc, and one of the big highlights of this final episode for me was when Rex was trying to convince her to just sort of tear through the clones that were trying to kill her, because he was telling her it's not going to make a difference to them whether they live or die. And her response was basically, it's going to make a difference to me. If they don't care about whether they're going to die, that's on them, but I'm not going to be the reason they die. And,
one of the reasons that I didn't touch on, I did a whole video over on my YouTube channel about the legacy of the Clone Wars. One of the points that I almost put in, but I didn't, was the fact that the Clone Wars adds this sort of moral ambiguity to the entire prequel trilogy. Star Wars traditionally, as we all know, is this very black and white, good versus evil franchise. And the Clone Wars comes in and says, whoa, 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 it's not like that. Like, wars aren't like that. There are good people on both sides. And Ahsoka is like the perfect example of that.
Yeah.
She fights for one side her whole life, and then she leaves and she realizes, wow, like maybe all that stuff I was doing wasn't the right thing.
Right.
And she's constantly in this battle of how can I do the right thing, even though there are two completely polar opposite sides going at each other. And that's what really made Clone Wars extra special sometimes, was like just that extra added question of what is truly right in this situation, rather than the Jedi versus the Sith.
Right. Yeah, definitely. I love playing in that moral gray area, because I think that just more interesting storytelling comes out of it. You have chances for more complex characters.
A perfect example of that is Luke in The Last Jedi, where like Luke is heralded as the savior of the universe, the best Jedi ever, and he's like, yo, the Jedi suck.
Yeah.
And Rey's just like, what?
Yeah, he's like a normal dude. He's like, bro, we effed up. Like,
yeah, and he says the legacy of the Jedi is failure, and it's always so interesting to me. It's a perception of Star Wars thing, but you have the original trilogy and you have Luke's journey, and what we learn about the Jedi in the prequels, and we'll include Clone Wars in there. Luke does not follow the path of a traditional Jedi. In fact, in Empire, Yoda is literally yelling at him to not leave Dagobah. That's not the Jedi way. It's, you can't go save your friends. And Luke says, no, I'm going to save my friends. And I think that's something that makes Luke's character great, and I think that's something that's intrinsic in Ahsoka, loyalty to people rather than doctrines and ideals. And we get to see a nice development of Ahsoka's relationship with Rex too, which comes more into play down the line as well in Rebels. But so I really like that too. That little they make it out together was cool too about this arc.
Another thing that really struck me with this arc was how many times, whether it be Ahsoka or Mace Windu or the Jedi in general, they could have helped each other like 8 different times in this arc and could have prevented Order 66, stopped Palpatine, saved Anakin maybe. And that is like the most frustrating thing and honestly heartbreaking. And I think they really nailed that on the head. Because you really are left wondering, like, what would have happened if Ahsoka had gotten to speak to Anakin one more time, or if Anakin was with her when they went to Mandalore. I mean,
or if Ahsoka told the council what Maul told her.
Yeah.
Like there's so many ifs, and it's like every single time I watch Episode 3, when I get to the part where Mace could literally kill Palpatine, he is about to do it. Why are you waiting for the theatrics at home, man? You could have just ended it. You could have gotten it over with. But then you wait for Anakin to show up, who's just like having the biggest mood swing of his teenage years ever because
Just having the worst possible day imaginable.
yeah, it was the
Anakin's
worst
one
combo
bad
of
day.
things ever. Yeah, Anakin in a not so terrible, horrible, bad day, you know? But there's, like you said, Gianni, there's so many ways that this could have been avoided, but at the same time, that's what's so beautiful about it was because the Jedi needed to end. And as much as you love them, as much as there's so many cool characters, they failed the universe. Their legacy's failure. And that's the thing about the Clone Wars too, is you would never think, knowing the ending of a show, you're gonna love it so much leading up to the end. Like we all knew,
Yeah.
like, okay, Ahsoka's not in episode 3. Where does she go? And then her story became one of the most beloved, fresh, new stories out of all of Star Wars. That whole arc where she's being exiled from the Order, and then like in that last arc when Mace Windu was like that's a matter only for the Council, not citizens. I was just like, oof, like that hurt, you know? Like that stuff is so good.
I don't know what this is worth or what this fits into the conversation, but as soon as you
We're having some Zoom difficulties again. Ian
Yeah,
will be back
well,
shortly.
it clearly didn't mean enough for the conversation. He's just frozen. Yeah, Ian, you froze again.
all right, am I back?
Yeah, you're back
good.
now.
Yep.
Okay, anyway, I don't know where this fits in, but as soon as you were talking about Ahsoka in the early times, I remember like going to the theater and seeing the Clone Wars. I don't know if you were there with me, Luke. We might have saw it together.
I don't
But
think
I
we
remember-
did, but I know what conversation you're about to talk about.
Ahsoka was like the most hated thing.
Mhm.
Oh, he's frozen again. Well,
be
I
back.
can speak for him. Ahsoka was the most hated character. It was like, she's
Yeah.
pointless. We don't know who she is. How is she here? She wasn't in 3. Like, how does this fit in? They just didn't talk about it. And like, young Ahsoka is annoying. Like, first season Ahsoka, like, I get it that Padawans make mistakes. They're not full-fledged
Snips.
Jedi.
It's
Yeah, snips. Oh, but like that, like the Malevolence arc, she just complains the whole time. Like
In a lot of ways, she was like her master in those early seasons, I think.
I agree.
facts.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah,
Well, I think it's interesting, and I think Gianni, I think you really hit it on the head because like Ahsoka kind of takes the route that we all wish Anakin would have taken, and what would have been different. Like they take two different paths. There's the Jedi bring them together, and they both leave the Order in very different ways under different circumstances. But Ahsoka ends up being, despite not being a Jedi, being a force for good in the galaxy. Where Anakin, you know, he's got some problems. He does some bad things. I don't know how to explain that to you guys, but Anakin, I see a lot of people on Twitter like standing Anakin now, and it's like, all right, you're in for his redemption, but let's not make any mistakes.
Let's not mince the facts here. I mean, this guy's a cold-blooded murderer here.
Oh, yeah.
They're genocides.
This is
But-
Ted Bundy level stuff.
Yeah.
he just very casually committed genocide, and we're all just like, no, but he's awesome.
But yeah, I think you guys were talking about this about how knowing the end of the story, Luke, like you were saying, knowing the end of the story and still having it be so good. That's one of the most difficult things to pull off for a prequel, and that's why so many prequels aren't good, and so many people don't like prequels, because I think for a prequel to like have a ton of value, it either needs to be like so much fun that you don't care it's not adding anything significant to the story, or it has to add something significant to the story that changes things. And Clone Wars manages to do both. So I think that's one of the things that makes it so incredible, is the fact that it is a prequel and it does have a set beginning point that we know and a set end point that we know. And it was still able to tell so many stories, flesh out so many characters, and really change the way you see the overall saga with an animated show that I don't think people gave credit to when it started and thought that it would evolve into this.
You know, I wonder,
Yes.
I've been thinking about the thing you said about Ahsoka, how she was kind of that first generation of Jedi that left the order and said, maybe this doctrine that we cling to isn't all that it's cracked up to be, and then you see Luke leave he doesn't leave. Luke follows this different path of a Jedi that wasn't the Yoda way, that wasn't the Obi-Wan way, that wasn't the old way.
Again.
I wonder how much the Clone Wars influenced the new Disney trilogy in that way. Like, did J.J. Abrams look back and say, wow, look at this character, look what she did. This is probably the right way to go. Like, I wonder that a lot sometimes when I watch, like, The Last Jedi and think, I can see the hints of Clone Wars in this. Like, I can see the same sort of parallels going here. So there had to have been some sort of influence there.
Yeah, for sure. I think it definitely helps to have something that already existed in Star Wars canon that, at that point, at the point of Disney's purchase of Star Wars, Clone Wars was already, like, pretty beloved. Maybe not to the level it is now, but a lot of people knew about it and a lot of people liked it. So for people like JJ and Ryan making Star Wars movies and seeing, like, okay, well, here's an established piece of the canon that people enjoy, where they're doing these different things and not really focusing on the black and white binary, but more the gray area, and people are liking it. So maybe we can explore this in a different medium. I would say it probably influenced it to some degree to allow them to sort of know that this was a direction they were okay with going in.
I think something interesting about the Clone Wars, and yes, I'm finally back. Soon just told me that my internet is unstable, so thanks, Soon. Not that Ian and I live like 2 minutes from each other, so I'm not surprised.
We live like in lead caves.
Yeah, it's terrible.
It's terrible.
Yeah, it's awful. But something interesting from the documentary that's on Disney Plus right now, the first episode dropped about The Mandalorian. Dave Filoni was talking about his relationship with George Lucas and how he kind of got introduced into Star Wars. And he said that before he came on, he worked on Avatar: The Last Airbender, and that's how they found him. And then when he came over, he talked to George, and George was like, everything you know about animation and art, forget about it. And he taught him about filmmaking. And he was like, you're going to make an animated show, but I want you to think of shot construction. I want you to think of where the camera will be in your scene. And like, that's how Dave approached the Clone Wars. And I think that it shows, especially in the Siege of Mandalore arc, where like there's things reminiscent of Rian Johnson's cinematography in The Last Jedi in those episodes, where like it just looks beautiful. Like the shots in this animated show are so good. And this isn't something you talk about a lot when it comes to animated shows.
Right.
Like movies, sure, but TV shows, no, not
And
many
you know
shows
what?
think about it.
I think that's why a lot of people really love the Clone Wars series, because even though it was made by Dave Filoni and you had all these different directors and writers, it just has these subtle hints of George Lucas all the way through. Like, George worked on this, and because there is that stipulation attached to it, you can really see it. Like, this series is so beloved, I really think, because this is something that came out of George's head. Like, this is his very last contribution to the whole saga.
And it feels like I think that what the original trilogy shows and what a lot of Star Wars show is that George Lucas is a visionary genius that cannot do it all on his own.
No.
And George Lucas's ideas and general concepts executed by other artists, writers, performers, etc., really take it to the next level. And George is the brain behind all that. So I think that's an interesting thing with the prequel trilogy, where he's the writer and director on all three films, versus the Clone Wars show, where you have George Lucas, you have his vision and his influence there in the Clone Wars, but other people are executing it in ways that maybe George couldn't, versus George is kind of like on his own in the prequel trilogy, and he's doing everything his own way, and nobody's coming in to say, maybe not this character here, maybe not this, maybe not so reliant on the CG. That doesn't exist in the prequel trilogy, but it does exist in Clone Wars. And I think that the thing that people always refer to Clone Wars as is the prequels executed properly. What the prequels should have been is what Clone Wars is. So I think that's a point well taken about George's influence. And I think it's just being executed to the best possible degree. especially as the show goes on.
I think
Yeah.
that Dave Filoni is like the extension of George Lucas now in Star Wars, where he was almost like his protege. I mean, working so closely together on the Clone Wars, because even when the show wasn't happening, they were still talking. I mean, Dave talks about his relationship with George all the time, about how great of friends they became and how much of a mentor he was. And like Star Wars, it's like there's these themes that always come back, even in movies like Rogue One or Solo or shows like Rebels and Clone Wars, where they're not about Luke Skywalker or Anakin Skywalker, but it's the same ideas. It's the same feelings that make them Star Wars. And you need somebody with a brain, with the ambition like George Lucas in 77 to make this movie happen. But then as more and more people get attached, I mean, Dave Filoni created one of the best TV shows ever, I think, in this show. Like, and I can't wait to see what his team does next, because hopefully it's not Resistance season 3. But like this show, just it's for Star Wars fans. Like, obviously, if you're not a Star Wars fan, you're probably not gonna like it. Like, you can be a casual movie fan, but if you're not a fan of the movies, you're not gonna be into this, because this is hardcore Star Wars stuff. I mean, it's a lot about lore, it's a lot about history, it's about specific battles and characters, but at the same time, it elevated the game for Star Wars for its like outside content of like, this is the first significant piece of Star Wars content that's not a numbered movie to work.
Yeah. So I guess just some closing thoughts on the Clone Wars.
It's great.
Personally, it is great. Personally, for me, I love how it informs the prequels going forward for me. I think season 7 was the perfect cap for it, especially that Siege of Mandalore act. And my favorite thing, growing up with the series has been that there are so many different stories told within the Star Wars universe that don't necessarily always have to relate to Star Wars. Like, there's a lot of political commentary in this show. I know it gets a rap still for being a kid's show, but it can be really graphic at times. And just for that alone, the uniqueness of it, the fact that you don't necessarily have to watch everything. And I kind of disagree with you, Luke. I think that if you're not a Star Wars fan, you can find something to love in this series in particular. But that for me is why I always find myself wanting to go back and revisit certain arcs or even see episodes more times over than I ever thought I would. And to me, that's what Star Wars is about. It's finding something that you can latch onto and revisit as you get older and find new things and glean new life from it. And that's something that I think Clone Wars is going to do for people for a long time.
Yeah, for sure. And I appreciate the non-linearness, I guess, of Clone Wars, because Gianni, like you were touching on, like sometimes I want to watch a specific arc, either because something new is coming. Like I remember when Last Jedi was coming out and when Rise of Skywalker was coming out, kind of wanting to revisit the Mortis arc to just dig into the Force a little bit and revisit what was said there. And you can do that without losing anything. You don't need to rewatch the show to get to a certain point to find that value. So I really appreciate that structure. It's not something that I would have thought, like enjoying the fact that it's non-linear, but I really do. And I really think it helps it hold its value because you can revisit certain things that are still important to Star Wars as you go on. It's just a great show. I'll always be grateful for it. Introducing Ahsoka, because I think that Ahsoka is a great character, and and like you were touching on, enhancing the prequels a little bit, being supplementary material like that. It's really good for all those things. So I'm super happy we got this last season to wrap it up. I know it's gonna suck because now we got this last season. Everybody's like, oh, I kind of want more now,
Yeah.
which I'm right there with you. I'd love to see more of this show, but whatever comes next, I'm excited for, and I'm grateful for this, and I'm happy that they gave us one last season to kind of add some finality and closure to this journey.
I think something that's very true amongst TV is the best shows always leave you wanting more.
Mm-hmm.
And while it was rumored or like it was supposed to be 8 seasons, this show is great the way it is.
Yeah.
And at the way that the final season happened is just a testament to how loyal the fan base is to the show. Save the Clone Wars was a trending hashtag for years before Disney decided to be like, yeah, sure. So my biggest takeaway from this show is that the best part about Star Wars is how deep this universe is. And this show gave us so many amazing characters and stories and taught us so much about different planets, different species, just everything. I mean, from focusing on Kit Fisto on one episode or Plo Koon for like, I just loved learning about all these characters so much. And like you talked about the Mortis arc, learning about the Force, and then even Yoda's episode in season 6 where he kind of goes on his own Force journey.
Mhm.
There's just so much here that just makes Star Wars bigger and better and makes the universe feel so big, and that magic you feel from the movies. So this show is just damn good and I love it.
I think at the end of the day, the best part for me about Clone Wars is that it allowed other creators to come into Star Wars and make something original.
Oh no, did he freeze during his great final point?
I think he did.
He'll be back in a second. It's our internet.
We love
And
internet
it's funny
connections.
too. It's funny too because like we're right by like a cell tower. Oh, there he is.
I was frozen. I'm sorry. I'll start again. So the best part, yeah, thank you. Your internet connection is unstable. I couldn't tell. The best part about Clone Wars for me is that it allowed other creators to come into Star Wars and open the door open wider. Before the Clone Wars, Star Wars was like this. And then after the Clone Wars, it's now like this. There's so much that has been introduced in this series that people can build off of and make new stuff. Without the Clone Wars, you would have never had Solo, you would have never had Rogue One, because there would have never been this other material out in the universe that succeeded that people could build off of. You know, that's going to be the legacy of the Clone Wars going forward, was that this was the first thing to happen that wasn't the Skywalker films to succeed. You know, this was the first anthology material that succeeded. So because of that, there are opportunities that are endless out there for any creator to come in and make something really, really, really enjoyable.
Definitely, yeah. So before we wrap up, Ian, did you want to plug your channel one more time?
Yeah, one more time, Talking with My Hans on YouTube. You can also follow me on Twitter at @talkwithmyhans_. Thank you very much, guys. This has been a pleasure. You can have me on about Star Wars or baseball if you want to talk about baseball anytime.
For sure. It was really good to have you on.
Thank you, guys.
So thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. And we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Love the Clone Wars.